Okay, welcome to tonight's Town Talk for all y'all who are joining us on Facebook and YouTube. We're excited to have you. This is our this is our fourth online Town Talk that we've had since we've all been staying home and staying healthy. We did have aspirations prior to the quarantine to have these live again at our on our campus, our Hill Spring campus. But with everything that's going on, we switched to online. And a little bit of back history with these town talks is we started this back in January with hopes of just talking about timely topics that people might want to know about. We had Can Do Kids come and share a talk on screen time with preschoolers. We had Sharice Peck come from Richland Police Department and talk to us about social media and the dangers there. And we've had fun talks like nutritional talks. Last week we had our friend Emily Nielsen share about how does your garden grow. And so we've had a lot of really amazing speakers, and we've been excited to continue this in an online format as we're all home. So we thank you for joining us. There in the Facebook chat, if you could say hello, let us know that you're there. And tonight, as we do our Decoding the Pension Puzzle talk with my friend Michelle Clary, if you have a pension and you have a question, please post it in the Facebook chat or the YouTube chat, and we will try to get to that at the end of the talk tonight with Michelle. If she doesn't answer that question prior to. So who is Michelle? Michelle is a friend of mine who I met back in about 2012, 2013, something like that. And I was her personal trainer at the time. And so we met at 5 a.m. or something like that. And we exercised, and she would bring some of her staff who most of them, I think, still continue to work for her happily for a few years past that. She is the CEO and Senior Wealth Advisor at Piton Health in Kennewick. She's been in the Tri-Cities for many years doing wealth management. And so we just want to welcome her today as she's joining us from Montana. She's an hour ahead of us. But Michelle, thank you so much for joining us and going to teach us about pensions and use your expertise in this way today.
Awesome. Thank you, April. It's really a pleasure to join you guys. I've marveled really watching what you guys have put together with these town talks, both with the aspiration of in-person and as nimbly as you pivoted to virtual presentations. You've just done a really great job bringing value to your people. So that's awesome. Decoding the pension puzzle. So this is actually a presentation that was really organically started by the request of clients, really. The Tri-Cities has an abnormally high percentage of people who have pension plans, and we'll talk about the specifics of what that means, a pension, with regards to what we'll be discussing. But there's a lot of pension plans in the Tri-Cities specifically, and that has to do with the amount of government jobs and the amount of government contractors that are concentrated in the Tri-Cities. And as I've worked with clients over the last 22 years or so, mostly clients who reside in the Tri-Cities, it's become abundantly clear to me that the decision of what to do with a pension plan, whether you're a younger employee who has a pension and you're making decisions of how to utilize and maximize that benefit, or whether you're nearing retirement and getting ready to make some of those really big decisions, it's critically important that it's understood well and that you have the capability of understanding how the decisions you make with a pension fit into all the other financial planning decisions that one makes. So that's what we're going to talk about as we go through this together. So what is a pension plan anyway? A pension plan, and what we're going to be addressing specifically this evening, is a defined benefit plan. Now, that's different than a defined contribution plan. A defined contribution plan is one where you know what's going in. If you're putting away $50 a month or $500 a month into a 401k or some type of a retirement plan, you know what's going in. What's defined is the contribution. With a defined benefit plan, you have a promise of what's going to come out to you one day. And it's usually defined as an amount of money on a monthly basis. And there's a bunch of different choices that accompany that, but that's what we're going to be discussing is defined benefit plans. Um, a couple other tidbits just from a historical perspective. The first pension plan was actually created by American Express in the late 1800s. And of course, as often happens, the first defined benefit plan was actually created out of tax advantages. And American Express was then followed by many, many other companies and governmental institutions that created defined benefit plans. I joke around that when I started in this business nearly 25 years ago, I would tell stories in front of groups and I would say, one day I'm going to be an old financial planner. I'm going to walk around with a cane and I'm going to say, I remember the day when there were these things called pension plans. And, again, it's somewhat surprising to me that 25 years later, pension plans still exist and they're becoming less common. But as I mentioned, especially in the Tri-Cities, they're fairly prevalent, and so important that a good understanding is placed around those. In the late 70s, especially in the early 80s, 401k plans started proliferating, and there's less of a unknown financial obligation for corporations and institutions to offer defined contribution plans like a 401k than there is a defined benefit plan. And so, truly defined contribution plans like 401ks are more common now. But again, we still have pension plans in the breadth of different elements that are available to many employees, and so it's really important that they're well understood. So, what choices? I'll go back to this, and I'll read the headline if it happens to be blocked for any of you. What choices can I make to maximize the benefit for me and my family? And this is really the critical question that you need to ask when you're getting ready to make pension benefit election decisions. And I'm going to fast forward to where some of you may be and others may not, but the throes of when you're near the end of your employment years and you're getting ready to retire and make the decisions of how to receive the benefit. Sometimes I have a client sitting at my conference room table that says, boy, I'm really looking at this single life option because it's the one that allows for me to have the most money that I can as a monthly benefit starting the first month that I retire. And my coaching to them is to really step back and think about the decision in terms of, let's just say that there's a big bag of money on this table, and this big bag of money represents the pension plan that your employer is allowing for you to somehow define a way that you're going to receive a benefit from this bag of money. And by doing that, often you may have 6, 8, 10, 12, 15 different alternatives of how you collect monies out of this bag of money. And the coaching that I provide is, don't view it as what's going to get me the most money next month. You really want to think about the manner by which you're going to receive the most amount of money from the plan for you, your spouse, your children, the charities that you're passionate about, over the course of your lifetime. So that's the big picture, and that's the premise that we're trying to solve for most often. If you're again any stage, but I think this particular question and the explanation that's going to accompany it's going to feel like I'm stepping away from uh, specifically talking about defined benefit plans for a minute, but the correlation is going to come back into clarity very quickly. Okay, so hang with me. Um, I believe very strongly that this question and a couple of premises that surround this question are it's one of the most misunderstood elements of financial planning. And if people had a better understanding of this particular premise right here, you would make much, much, much better decisions with regards to money choices. And it's this question. So, would you rather have $2,500 a month or $750,000? Which one? A guaranteed income stream or a lump sum of money? And when I think about the way that this question is posed, it has to do with two misunderstood principles, and they're opposite of one another. The first is the illusion of wealth. $750,000 sounds like it's a lot of money, right? And it is. It's a lot of money. But in retirement, you care, trust me, you care a lot less about your wealth and a lot more about the capability of satisfying a standard of living that you're accustomed to. If you are a somebody that likes to travel, you're going to want to continue to do some traveling in retirement. If you're somebody that your charitable passions are critically important to you, guess what? You're going to want to continue to give generously in retirement. And the attainment of the capability of maintaining a cash flow in retirement is much more important to retirees than and I'll say most retirees because everybody has their own value proposition, but that's more important to most retirees to be able to maintain a standard of living. So again, I will tell you that from the standpoint of if you're 65 years old and you have an average life expectancy of 20 years, these two decisions are almost exactly the same. Okay, I would view a $2,500 a month guaranteed stream of income to be worth about $750,000. And so the one of the important elements and how I'm going to come back to pension decisions is this, that it takes a lot of money to create an income stream. Right? If you think about how much does it take to create $2,500 a month? Well, it's about $750,000. And if you have a pension that is worth $2,500 a month at age 65, the value equivalent of that in a present value term is about $750,000. So it's the illusion of wealth, meaning you need to have a lot of money to create an income stream, and the misunderstanding of how valuable a cash flow is. So it's a really important understanding to fundamentally have when you're making pension decisions. When a employee is nearing the decision of how they're going to collect a defined benefit pension option, we first start off by we say, okay, great. We need to help you evaluate a pension benefits statement. And when you receive a pension benefit statement, it usually just encompasses these first two columns. Okay, it'll say the pension option and it'll list a few. I've made this fairly simple by just listing four. I've seen options as wide as 12. So there's different pension options. Then the next is the dollar amount that's provided for that said pension option decision. And I take it a step further. So this is the way I diagram these pension benefit statements for my clients. And the assumption in this example is that John is the employee, he's the soon to be retiree, and Sally is his spouse. So the way this works is that if John and Sally are alive together, this is the benefit that they receive given different pension options. So single life would say that John will receive 2811 for the rest of his life. And if John, so these columns indicate John only, so John's surviving Sally, and Sally only, so Sally surviving John. And of course, as a retiring couple, that the couple wants to, and usually the mentality that they retire with is that they're going to be retired for, maybe decades, and they're going to hold hands the whole time, and they'll die together on the same day. And the reality is that usually we're called home at different times, right? And so Sally may live without John for years, maybe a decade or more, while John is not yet alive with her, and depending upon the choice that's made with that pension, maybe not receiving that pension benefit. So if John elected single life, they together would receive 2811. If he survives Sally, he would continue to receive 2811. But if John passes away, if John passes away, Sally would receive $0 for the rest of her life. And so you can think about this in a dramatic sense, and examples are often better understood with a little err on the side of being dramatic. Let's say that John and Sally are in the HR department the day that John retires. They sign the papers, and John elects the single life. Sally would have to sign off on that in a community property state like we live in. But let's say that Sally signs off, John elects the benefit, they walk out the door, and John is killed in a car accident. Okay. They would only receive 1 month of 2811 and no more money from that pension plan that, remember, was worth about $750,000 to them, right? Now, if they elected the joint and survivor option, they would acquiesce to a smaller benefit during both of their lifetimes. And this is again, April and I were visiting a little bit about this in our queuing, and that is that it's tough to make that choice, because you can see here there's a substantial difference between these benefits. But in that dramatic example that I gave, whereby John passed away right away, Sally would continue to get 2337 for the rest of her life. And so it's really important to understand the ramifications of one person passing away before the other. These other percentages down here, 66 joint and survivor, 50% joint and survivor, these are reductions on the survivorship benefit that would go to Sally if John passed away first. So that's the way that works. I've seen some benefits where you can actually elect. So let's use this example: joint and survivor 100% and 20-year certain. Okay, so in that example, if John and Sally were both killed the first day after they signed the benefit election, then their children or their charity, if they put a charitable organization as a surviving beneficiary, would continue to receive that benefit for the remainder of the 20 years. So there's often more elaborate alternatives, but these are all questions that need to be asked when you're approaching those really important decisions. So, questions to ask yourself as you're approaching these decisions. One is, what is my life expectancy? So, if John is 65, getting ready to retire, and he has terminal cancer where he's expected to live for 6 months, um, there would be a different choice than 100%, or I'm sorry, a 0% or a single life option that he would want to pick, right? Because it wouldn't make sense to, in most cases, only leverage his life expectancy. What is my spouse's life expectancy? So there again, let's say that John has a short life expectancy and Sally is impeccably healthy, and all of her aunties and her mom have lived, let's see, even grannies and aunt grannies have lived to age 110, right? You're likely going to be in a good position to leverage Sally's life expectancy. What other ways can I create income in retirement? So this has to do with understanding the totality of the individual's planning scenario. So, as an example, if the only stream of income that a couple has is a pension, it may very well lead to different decisions than if they not only have that pension, but they've built a really big 401k, and they have rental property and really nice social security benefits. So it's important to not make the pension decision in an isolated fashion, but you take into account everything else, especially in some second marriages where assets go to children from previous marriages. That's where it gets even a little bit more complicated. But the bottom line is it's really important to take into account other ways that income can be created in retirement. And then what are my current and future cash flow needs? So, let's say that there's a scenario where for maybe 10 years, even though the worker is going to be retiring, they're going to be working part time for 10 years because you're just one of those people that gets a lot of joy out of working. You want a little bit more flexibility, but you want to stay involved in the areas that you've been gifted. And there could be a credence to those part-time income decisions having a bearing on what pension alternative you elect. And then lastly, what are my estate planning considerations? There's a very different planning journey for someone that says, I want my last breath and my last penny to have a photo finish, than if there's an aspiration to leave monies to children, heirs, and charitable organizations up on one's passing. So that's another important consideration. So the pros and cons of taking a lump sum, and I'll just go back to often among the different list of alternative choices that one can make when retiring with a defined benefit pension plan. Sometimes a lump sum option is available. So John may indeed have the choice to, rather than take a monthly benefit that's guaranteed by the organization that he retires from, he could potentially take a lump sum option. So let's just say that he has the option of taking 750,000. In most cases, you'd want to not pay taxes on that immediately, but roll it into a 401k. Uh, what are the pros and cons of that? And that's another question that I get asked regularly. So the pros, well, the pros are you maintain the flexibility on how it's invested. So you could then invest that 750,000 in whatever way you chose to invest it. If you have a short life expectancy, this could prove to have a significant advantage. So let's say that John and Sally both have terminal cancer. Again, dramatic example, but let's say they both have a terminal illness at the time that John retires. If they are only going to receive 12 months of benefits, there could be a significant advantage for them to take the lump sum and invest it, and then leave that money to their heirs and charitable organizations after they pass away. So cons, and these are important cons to understand, because some of it is just human nature, and the fact that many of us lack the discipline to make the decisions to stretch a benefit out. Now, it isn't a reason to not do it, but you just really have to be aware of the cons and the risk. So, do you really have the discipline necessary to take distributions? Okay, I've read uh, where we have had a few clients that have made this election. I haven't experienced this with clients on a personal level, but I've recently read that the average time that it takes for somebody who elects a lump sum pension option to blow through their money is 5 years and 1 month. Okay. And so you have to be aware of that. It's a similar phenomena where you see people that win the lottery, right? They have a difficult time being disciplined about making those distribution decisions. So it's just something that requires a lot of discipline. Second con, the longer you live, the higher the risk you could run out of money in a lump sum scenario. And so even if you are being disciplined, let's just say that you do have a lot of discipline, you really impose the limitation, because of course, let's go back to the differences. If you elect a $2,500 a month benefit, and 1 month you say, I'd rather have $10,000 this month. You can't do that. That isn't a choice you can make. But if you roll the entire 750,000 into a 401k, you can make that choice. You can take 10,000 every month out until it's gone, and that would be pretty quick. So there's a real risk involved in the potential to have significant longevity and the inability for that distribution to continue for long periods of time. So, is there an advantage? And I have to see this label again. Is there an advantage to delaying the start of the benefits? Okay, this is really important. There again, uh, especially for younger people, again, I fear sometimes that there just isn't resources to help to define the different options available with pension plans. So I just employ the younger people to pay attention, because once you've got this, you've got it. But it's possible that you may not hear it again like this. So you want to be really aware is that there's often advantages to delaying the start of the benefit, and often they're very significant. It's important to pay attention to that. So in this example, we're talking about, and these, by the way, are actually real live numbers for a client's case that I was working on, within the last year. And that the concept is this, that the individual was 59 years old and she was ready to retire. She could afford to retire. She was emotionally ready for it. She had lots of plans for significantly impacting lots of different people in her life past the time that she continued to work. So she was going to lead a life of significance in retirement. And again, financially, she was prepared to create the needed income to sustain her lifestyle. So she was going to retire at 59. Now, it's important to remember that the decision of when you retire doesn't need to coincide with when you start the pension, right? You can retire and start the pension later. In some cases, you can start the pension from a different employer sooner and retire later. So these are not mutually exclusive decisions from a timing perspective. So this individual retired at 59, but my advice to her was to let's create income that's needed from different sources between age 59 and 65, because we requested a pension benefit statement that showed what's the benefit at 59. And I also want to know what is it at 60, 61, 62, 63, 64, 65, 66, until there's no benefit to delay. And what we found was that there was approximately a 10% annual increase to delay that benefit between age 59 and 65. So she retired at 59. We created the needed income from different means, and that allowed for her to delay the start of the pension until 65, at which time she received a substantially larger benefit that is then guaranteed for the rest of her life. Okay, also get the question regularly surrounding what about a single life option and then buying life insurance to provide the means for Sally to be taken care of. And so when we look at that option, what we're really doing is we're evaluating, well, between the single life number and the joint and survivor, there is $473 a month of a difference there. And so it's a valid question to say, well, if we acknowledge that what you're doing by choosing a joint and survivor is you're buying a type of life insurance and you're spending $473 a month to do that. So we can, there's no doubt, we can look at the option of using that $473 a month to buy a death benefit that creates monies after John's passing, in our example, to provide for Sally. The question is really this: does that $473, first of all, is the retiree insurable at all? It's possible that they're not, if they're not abundantly healthy. Insurance is also pretty expensive at age 65, and so it is a daunting task to be able to buy enough of a lump sum, back to it takes a lot of money to create an income stream. It's a daunting task to buy enough life insurance to create an adequate amount to support that surviving spouse, Sally, in this case. So it's definitely a good question. I can tell you that the numbers are not easy to make work, but it's a valid question. And then one of the last technical points that I wanted to make is this, that if your pension has a COLA, or a cost of living adjustment, an inflation increase. So it starts at $2,500, and then it goes up by a little bit the next year, and up by a little bit the year after that. Um, that is what I like to call the golden goose. It's a huge benefit. And if you do have that cost of living adjustment on your pension, you want to be sure that you're leveraging that benefit even more, because it's very rare and very, very valuable. Is my pension safe? I hear this often, because a guarantee is only as good as the entity, the organization that's guaranteeing the benefit. Some of the things that I encourage people to do is to take a look at the ratio, the funding ratio for their specific pension plan. So that funding ratio, you want to see it above 80%. And that's a measure of the amount of assets and their capability of creating the needed benefit down the road. So, it's a very individualized pension question, but one that is very important to dive into. And it's the ratio that creates the best starting point. So with that, I can take a few questions. The final theme, if you haven't heard it loud and clear, is just to understand that it's a really big decision, and make sure that you're making it with wisdom, that you really have a good understanding of the totality of your financial planning circumstances in terms of being prepared to make a great choice.
Awesome. I've got lots of notes here to take to Nick, who, since coming back to the Tri Cities after our retreat to Texas, Nick started working for a local credit union, and he has a pension now, and so a lot of these things, I kind of think we have to sit down and kind of talk about a few of them now. We did get a question come in. It says, what can or should you do with a pension if you don't work in that industry anymore, or for that company?
Yeah. So it's a really good question. So what I would recommend is that even if you're many years away from retiring and starting the benefit, that you engage in, as often as annually, requesting from that entity a pension benefit statement. And so what you're doing is you're just keeping tabs with the former organization. I've worked with clients over the years where the former organization is sold to a different company, and thus the pension obligation transitions with that. It's really easy to lose track of what's happening, and so that's why I ask clients to go and request that updated pension benefit statement up to annually. Sometimes maybe annually is a little bit redundant, but every other year would start to get a little concerning to me if there isn't tabs that are made just to keep track pretty regularly.
Okay. What about differences in different vesting levels with their pensions? And do you
Yep.
make any on a lower vesting level?
Yeah, so the vesting schedule is defined specifically by the organization. And so there's many organizations that they don't receive a pension up until they've worked for the institution for 5 years. And sometimes there's different scales that they'll advance to after they've been with the organization for more years. Teachers plans, they really start to max out after decades of being an employee within a school district. So there's I think an important point in clearly understanding the vesting schedule for pensions that you're involved in, because certainly if it's a 5-year vesting schedule and you only stay for 4 years and 11 months, that's a bummer. So you really do want to understand that, and it's different and specific to each organization. So important to uncover that as you're working on your financial planning needs.
Somebody texted me a question knowing that we were doing this tonight, and they asked, can your pension run out? Like just while they're alive? Maybe the person who worked for the company. Yeah.
Yeah, and with that, so a pension, a defined benefit pension by definition would be guaranteed to continue for the life of the retiree. Now, can it run out? We've talked about some of those scenarios. If you choose a single life and that person dies, then it would not continue to the survivor. There's also been lots of examples of where pensions have actually went defunct. The most famous one is Enron, right? And there is a pension benefit guarantee corporation. So it's an entity within the governmental system that provides a backstop and a benefit if a pension goes defunct. It doesn't always cover the entire benefit, but there is a backstop to that. There's also plenty of examples where pensions have become massively underfunded and thus started to create a smaller benefit for people where it started off as 1,000 and it's reduced by 25% because the pension was massively underfunded. So there are definitely examples. It goes back to monitoring that funding ratio, and I think too, just hopefully there's other elements of a person's financial plan that allow for a little bit of give and take.
Mhm. Um, is your pension, the money that you get monthly, is that taxed or is that pre-tax? That's a question that somebody also asked me.
hmm Yeah, almost always. There are a few oddballs out there where there's an element of the pension that is not taxable. But without getting into too many intricate details, almost always the full amount of the pension benefit is taxable. Yep.
I think that's I haven't had any other questions come in on the Facebook or YouTube, but this was certainly insightful for us. Do you have any other closing advice for us as you've kind of flooded my brain with pension knowledge?
Yeah, again, I just go back to embrace it, and also just be grateful too, because it's a really fantastic element of a holistic retirement plan. I think too, don't depend so much on it, that if you have a pension, still build an emergency fund and have the appropriate amount of term life insurance to protect your family, and save in your 401k and all those types of things. But do recognize that it's a big opportunity and an important element of your financial planning to understand and leverage. But it's a part, right? There's lots of other important moving parts to retirement planning.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michelle, for doing this. I'm so glad I've known you for 7 something years, and I'm learning from you now. I used to teach you, but now you're teaching me.
Yes, you did.
Oh,
Yep.
awesome. Well,
Yep.
thank you so much. I hope you and your family stay safe there in Montana and enjoy the woods. And we'll catch you back when you come back to the Tri Cities.
Awesome. Thank you, April. Thanks, Trevor.
Ready?